Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
I'm goody good. Why? 'Cause you're gonna be kind of drunk.
Probably.
I don't totally know what's.
I don't know what's causing
What's doing that.
Yeah. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Team Morale Podcast, where we do our three favorite things. We talk a little bit of booze, a little bit of beer, and a whole lot of basketball. Joining me, as always, he's got an Oregon sweatshirt on, his work hat. He's all business. The tall guy himself, Mitch.
Yep, checking in. It's actually a Bend, Oregon specific to where I used to live. Shout out Bend, Oregon.
Bend,
Central Oregon Daily.
I like how I introduced you just with what you're wearing every day.
I
That's
love
all I'm
it.
going to do. So at some point, you're going to have to wear some pretty funky things.
The people need to know.
We're going to have a fashion segment, and it's just going to be Mitch in his grout fits.
Yes. Yeah, I was really rocking the grout fit today.
And for those who don't know, a grout fit is an outfit of all gray.
It
All shades of gray.
It matched how I was feeling throughout the long work day today.
Well, we've got a busy podcast ahead of us. We are finishing up what we started last podcast, which was our top 10 in the East. We're doing our top 10 in the West. Much more difficult this time, Mitch. Much more difficult.
Yeah, the West is friggin' brutal.
Just the worst.
Just going through, we are going through it just like last time. We have our own rankings of what is going to be the guaranteed list of who will be 1 through 10 going into it. Now, I don't feel as guarantee-ish about the West as I felt about the East.
Oh, they still have to play this one. Last time we're like, we guarantee it. This one, I mean, we still have decisions to make. We cannot agree on some of our top 10. We will be arguing it, duking it out in some of this podcast because we just couldn't agree on some of these things.
No, and I think that that's just going to be the story of the West is who clicks early, who doesn't, what coaching staffs really get their teams in order throughout the course of the season, who has injuries and whatnot, because it's almost impossible to really tell who's going to be where in the West this year.
No ideas. And we've kind of been able to bring it into tiers almost, where we've got the tier of title contenders, and then we have pushing for the Western Conference, and then solid playoff teams, and then the bubble playoff teams, and even the bubble playoff teams, you look at them, you're like, I could see them being a 4 seed. I don't know.
The West is really good. Pretty much 1 through 12 to 13.
Yeah,
it's good basketball.
It is dangerous. But before we get too deep into this, let's talk what we're drinking tonight. Mitch picked out a doozy of a whiskey tonight, and I'm very excited to try it.
Yes, it is the Jefferson's very small batch bourbon.
Oh, it's bourbon. My bad.
Yeah, no. So this one. So here is the kind of the about us on their webpage. They were founded in 1997. Jefferson's is the brainchild of Trey Zoller and his father Chet, who is a famed bourbon historian. They were continuing a family tradition that goes back to Trey's 8th generation grandmother, who was arrested in 1799 for the production and sales of spirituous liquors. So this is a familial thing that's down the generational line that they're oh, let's keep making it because the grandma even got arrested for making booze back in the day.
You hate it when grandma gets arrested.
Yeah. It's Grandma, did you get arrested for selling booze again?
Damn it, Grandma, come on.
Grandma, we told you can't do that anymore. No, so they are fairly new. They did found it in 1997. I have never actually had the Jefferson's bourbon before. So
I've never seen it or heard of it, so I'm very excited to try it.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. One fun note about this brand is that they actually have one specific called the Jefferson's Ocean Bourbon that gets put on a boat inside of their barrels, and it will travel around the globe on a boat for 8 years or something like that, and that's how they age it.
So you're telling me there's boats out there that their sole job is just to drive around this bourbon and slosh it around in the barrel?
That is exactly what I'm telling you, and it is.
Where do I apply?
Yeah, I was gonna say, where do I get that job to drive that boat?
How drunk would you get on a nightly basis if your job was just to sail the 7 seas with bourbon?
Very drunk.
I'd be a pirate.
That's what I was gonna say. It's I'm just gonna adopt the pirate lifestyle and just be a
peg
pirate.
leg.
Probably
Be
just
awesome.
I just steal them. I just steal the whole boat. It'd be my boat full of bourbon.
I am the captain now.
So yeah, we will try this out and see what we think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I will say I had a sip of it before I put the ice in, and I thought that it had a lot of kind of spice and bite on the back end when I first, like, without any ice, and I put a couple ice cubes in it, and I think it's really, like, smooth and, like, caramely now.
I would say it's definitely smooth. Like that is
Yeah.
the big thing I'm getting, and I'm also getting a lot of vanilla.
Yes. Yeah, I think that, like, I think they put a lot of sugars in it. They want it to be a little bit more on, like, the sugary side, and that's why they have a lot of caramel and vanilla flavors in it.
I like my whiskey sweet.
Yes, you do. Full of ice and sweet.
Full of ice and sweet. I need to get that on a shirt. You'll have the Glue Guy Mellow shirt, and I'll have the full of ice and sweet.
As any good whiskey aficionado, full of ice and sweet whiskey is what you're all about.
I'm sure people are turning over in their grave right now, being like, this 23-year-old idiot doesn't know what's going on.
That's all right. We're going to get you learned up.
You're gonna get my taste buds learned up.
Yeah, we're gonna get your taste buds learned up. Someday we're gonna move you down to 3 cubes.
I had 5.
Someday, not today.
Not today. Today's not that day.
Another day.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get into our top 10 here. A lot of question marks, like we talked about earlier. The tiered system. Number 10 is definitely a tier of its own.
Yes, it really is. So, what we have here on the bottom. This bottom tier for the 10 seed, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the New Orleans Pelicans.
And all 3 of these teams could push for a playoff spot. We could see them, sucking and dropping, well below 500. But, like, we think the 10th spot is safe for all these teams. We debated this one, but I think both of Mitch and I can agree the Minnesota Timberwolves have a very talented roster, and that's what we have here at 10.
Yeah, so we went back and forth on this several times. The Grizzlies and the Pelicans both have potentially all generational talents in Zion and Ja, and then still solid rotations around them. But we don't think that their star talent is as developed as, like, what the Timberwolves star talent is with Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell as your main 2 guys. Both of them have been all-stars, D'Lo in the East, Cat in the West. And I also like the team that they've put around their 2 main stars too. So I slightly do lean towards the Timberwolves, but man, I would not be surprised at all to see either the Grizzlies or the Pelicans not only make it to the 10 spot, which is kind of the tier we have them in right now, but maybe even vault higher than that.
Yeah, I also love the addition of Anthony Edwards on this team. I mean, number 1 overall pick. He's like, it's not a strong class, so he's not like a team changer, but I think his fit on this team is just so, like, he's not going to be asked to do too much right away.
No, he won't. And, like, they actually have some pretty solid rotation guys outside of their top 2. I mean, they picked up Ricky Rubio to come back, a guy who used to play for the Timberwolves, is a solid vet, played really well for the Suns last year, is a guy that's going to come in and not really, like, mess up. He's not a turnover machine. He's not going to jack shots up, but he shoots fairly efficiently, plays good defense, is able to, like, distribute a little bit more than what D'Lo could at the point guard.
Yeah, and I love Jarrett Culver. I mean, he's young, he's raw, he's still figuring it out in the league, but I still think he has the potential to be a solid player in the NBA. Malik Beasley has shown that he can score and shoot the 3 at a scorching level.
If he can stay out of jail.
Yes, if he can stay out of jail. Ed Davis, who's going to be a solid rotation player for them. He's a Mav killer.
Ed. I love Ed Davis.
There are like 4 or 5 players in the NBA who aren't great players, but for some reason, when they see, oh, we're playing the Mavs, sure, a 30-20 game sounds great.
I think I was in the attendance at the
American Airlines Center.
Yeah, when Ed put up like a 2020 game against you guys.
And I'm just like, who are you? Why? Stop.
Naz Reid, who's going to be their backup center along with Fizz Ed, it was actually played really well last year as their backup center and can play a little power forward because he shoots 3s fairly well.
Yeah, I love this. Their big rotation. I mean, obviously Cat's amazing, but I love the rest of the people that they fill it out with. Josh Okogie's a solid player. I mean, the problem is you're young and Cat's never won any, his teams have never been good before. So this is the first time where, like, you're going into the season with, like, oh, this team could actually do something.
Yeah, I say with the exception of when they had Jimmy, this is the first time, if you're a Timberwolves fan, you're like, okay, we should make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, this team, I mean, I don't know if they should make the playoffs, but they definitely should be competitive.
Yeah, I think for me, it's more of a mindset. It's like you think as a T-Wolves fan is like, I think this is the year that we can actually make the playoffs.
So we have the Timberwolves beating out the Grizzlies and the Pelicans for the number 10 spot in our top 10 guaranteed. Mitch.
Guaranteed.
There it is. The next two teams are the teams that we have fought about for days. And by I mean days, I'm talking about the Phoenix Jazz and the Utah Suns. And I say that because we still can't figure out who's 8 and who's 9.
Okay, so to start this off, I will be taking the side of the Utah Jazz.
And I will be taking the side of the Phoenix Suns.
And we are going to figure out who will be the 8 seed right now.
Yeah.
All right, so here is the crux of my argument is that the Utah Jazz have been a solid team. I think they've been 4 and 5 seeds for the last 2 to 3 years, and they still have the same core that they had last year. They are not going to regress at all. If anything, I think Conley's going to fit into the system a little bit more after a whole year there. I think you could make the same argument for Bojan Bogdanovic. I think that they're going to come out next year and they're going to be just good enough to make the 8 seed, which is still a drop for them.
I agree, but that locker room has been through so much. And where there's smoke, there's fire. And people have been talking about the discord between Gobert and the roster there. And I'm not saying that team's not talented. I'm not saying that team's not good. I'm saying that team, while maybe not getting overly better, they added Derek Favors back, but they didn't do any major moves. The Suns, in my opinion, have one of the best backcourts in the NBA. They added Jay Crowder, who's one of the best glue guys in the NBA. Their young stars in DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker are only going to get better. I think that this Suns team is more talented than this Jazz team because of their locker room chemistry, which is probably going to be better just because the Jazz is bad. And Chris Paul showed what he could do with a young locker room in Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. And so I think that just pushes them over the edge.
And I think that the Suns are significantly a better team than what they were last year. But I believe the Jazz are pretty much about the same team. I do understand the argument that this team probably has a crack in the armor right now, which is that Gobert had his hands all over the microphones right before testing positive for COVID and giving every single person on the Jazz COVID and putting a big black eye on the team and being associated with the Utah Jazz and being associated with Rudy Gobert kind of looked bad at the time. I still think that you have guys who have been all-stars in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. If they can patch that together, I think that it will probably be the Jazz, but I'd be willing to be swayed differently. I think that Booker might be better than Donovan Mitchell, though, which would be a big argument.
Donovan Mitchell's a better two-way player, but Booker his offense might be good enough to say he's better.
Yeah, and I think Paul's going to compliment Booker a lot.
Chris Paul and Devin Booker are going to fit together so well. The fit is absolutely divine. You add in, people to surround them with Mikal Bridges, just defense and can knock down threes. Jay Crowder, who's your enforcer and can also knock down threes and play really good defense. And then you have DeAndre Ayton, who can block shots, who can do lobs, who can get some points in the paint and can still knock down the occasional jump shot. I just think that this Suns team, the starting five is armor tight. You have switchability on defense. You have the ability to knock down the three. You have the ability to create the offense. You have the ability to drive and kick. And then you look at their bench. I mean, you have some good bench players here in Javon Carter, who's a solid bench player. Cheick Diallo, who's another solid big. Langston Galloway, who's been underrated his whole career. You have Etuan Moore, who's a very well-traveled guard who's viewed poorly because he was overpaid at one point, but is still a serviceable NBA player. Damian Jones, another serviceable NBA player. You have Jonathan Motley, who's another young forward who can really, he was in the Mavs camp at one point, and that guy can play. He was a really highly recruited player, or highly touted player when he left Baylor. And then you have Dario Saric and Jalen Smith, their first-round draft pick, two really solid guys who can fill out that forward spot.
Well, I'll give you the Suns here. I was thinking about it. I do think that they're going to make a huge jump, and just for the drama of the Jazz having locker room issues and chemistry issues and falling out of the playoffs, but getting into that 9 spot, so they're going to have to play the Suns in that play-in tournament.
That is going to be a fun series. Yeah. I think that series would be really fun to watch. In my opinion, I think Chris Paul, a true leader, a Hall of Famer on this team of young kids, can really galvanize this team and push them into the playoff spot.
Yeah, I say that we go with Jazz at 9 and Suns at 8.
Jazz at 9, Suns at 8. I would agree with you there. 7, we have another interesting team, a team that is also in turmoil, a team that is very interesting, and that would be the Houston Rockets.
Oh, Houston. They may be in trouble down there in
Houston, we might have a problem.
Houston, we may or may not have a problem.
We're not sure.
We're not sure yet. Your problem does not lie with a lack of talent, though, which is an interesting problem, which is interesting that is not what their problem is, where I think that they have enough talent to be a playoff team, and they have enough talent to go and be the 2 seed again.
They have enough talent to push for a title.
Yes. I mean, when you have James Harden and Russell Westbrook, you still have Eric Gordon, you still have PJ Tucker. You went out and you got Christian Wood.
You saw Daniel House. Yeah, I was about to say another solid player. David Nwaba, one of the best underrated defenders in the NBA. Like this roster has talent to spare. They do lack at that forward center spot because other than Christian Wood and PJ Tucker, you really don't know. I guess they have Boogie. I forgot they have Boogie. They got Boogie.
Yes, they went out and they
Holy cow, this team is so talented.
Yeah, they went. We really haven't seen Boogie play in almost a couple of years. Not at all last year, and then only a little bit, but still got hurt the year before when he was with the Warriors. Yeah, they have plenty of talent. But how does Steven Silas do now that he comes in? He's the new head coach, and he's taking over for Mike D'Antoni. And this was Mike D'Antoni's team. This was Mike D'Antoni's system. The entire, we're just gonna run it. We're gonna let James Harden be the general and have the keys to the castle, and he's gonna do anything and everything he wants. Where does Silas go with this? I don't know.
He inherited a burning building, and I feel for that man. Former Mavs assistant coach, great guy, did a lot for the Mavs organization, highly loved there by the players. I mean, when he got the head coaching job, several Mavs players went to Twitter and said, well-deserved, we'll miss you, hate that you're a rival now, but much love as always. But he inherited a ship with holes in it right now, because as soon as he comes in, both his stars are like, I want out, and then the whole roster seems to crumble.
Yeah, it's like a $1 million house that's on fire.
Yeah.
It's a nice house. You can see that it's a nice house, but you just don't think it has the integrity to just stick with it for the rest of the year.
We hope that, in my opinion, I hope that Silas can pull it together and keep his stars there and do well, but it doesn't look good at this point.
Yeah, that's why we have them at 7. Is they could at some point during the season still make a huge trade. I think that they still are going to have chemistry issues regardless, and they still lack versatility on those wings. That 3-4 spot, which is such a valuable spot in today's NBA, especially when you're going to be going up against the Clippers with Kawhi and Paul George and the Lakers with Anthony Davis and LeBron. You need bigger, versatile wings, and they traded their best one in Rocco to the Blazers for
nothing.
For a bag of chips, pretty much.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That was the most crazy, unexplained move of the offseason. We're going to give you Rocco for literally nothing.
I don't get it. I still don't get it, and I think that that's exactly where they are lacking right now. This team would make a whole lot of sense if they kept Rocco. I think they may have panicked because they thought for sure James was going to force his way out. But that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, we're digressing. But in the grand scheme of things, the Rockets are an interesting team to where they have the talent to push. I mean, any team with James Harden, Russell Westbrook, you add in Christian Wood, another great scorer, three-level scorer and a great defender. You add in Boogie Cousins, where if he can even get a little bit of where he used to be, this team is a title contender.
Yeah.
But they got to get that. No, they don't have a foundation. Their locker room chemistry is garbage, and they have no foundation to build on.
Yeah, they're all over the place. And so this is going to be quite the project for Silas. I think that he was a great assistant, but if he can come in and galvanize the troops, yeah, they can go and make a run at the championship. But my prediction is that it's just too much ego, too much Russell Westbrook, Harden, and DeMarcus Cousins wanting the ball and not enough versatility on your bench. That it's going to lead to a lower seed in what is a absolute stacked Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, this team would be a 2-3 seed in the East.
Yeah. And
they're a 7 seed in the West.
Yep.
I mean, we've talked about it many times before. In my opinion, 4 through 9, really, 3 through 9, really, all are kind of interchangeable.
Yep.
It
totally
is
agree.
Absolutely crazy. And the crazy thing is, any team 3 through 9 could also miss the playoffs. The Rockets, if they I mean, one injury, they're done. And if James Harden does like a Anthony Davis and just decides to sit, they're gone.
Yeah.
They're done.
We were talking about this earlier. Every single team, maybe with the exception of the Clippers and Lakers, is one injury to a star player, a top 2 or 3 player on your team, from dropping out of the playoffs entirely. It's such a steep drop off, and you have to be at your best and as healthy as possible for this entire year.
It is a bloodbath in the West. Well, moving on to the 6th seed. My Dallas Mavericks. We have the Dallas Mavericks coming in at the 6th seed.
Yes. So I would say that right where there's the same sort of thing. I mean, if Luka just continues to go off, Kristaps actually comes back healthy, you could go and be the 2 seed. It would not stun me to see the Mavs end up as the 2 seed. It also would not stun me to see them end up as the 9 seed. So it's this huge ceiling and huge floor differential that you're sitting in right now. We chose the Mavericks to be over the Rockets because I think that they have more stability on their team with Rick Carlisle heading the ship.
Yes, and I mean, I'm biased, but I think Luka Doncic is going to pass a lot of people in terms of just player overall in the NBA. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be better than Harden, but I think he's going to rival Harden. Like, that kid is 22, and he is just cooking people constantly, and it's amazing. What our team, the Dallas Mavericks, will go as far as Kristaps Porzingis will take us, because Luka's going to do Luka things. He's going to be amazing. If Kristaps can come back and be healthy and be that number 2 scorer, I think it's going to make a lot of difference. I like the moves we made this offseason. It took me a while to come around to them. I wanted to go big game hunting, but I realize now that is not the time. It's next year, but adding Josh Richardson, his defense will help. I still stand by it. I don't love the Josh Green draft pick. I would have loved Sadiq Bey more, but he had some defense, which will help. I think Tyrell Terry will slide right into that Seth Curry spot and help out with the shooting. But I like this team. I think they got better than they were last year because of the defense that they bring in. But really, in the grand scheme of things, we're going to go as far as Kristaps takes us.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I mean, I think that you still have a good bench. You got plenty of solid role players around Luka, and this year, to me, screams potential Luka MVP season. If you guys can come in, let's say the 3 seed, even potentially the 4 seed, and Luka's out there averaging 30, 12, and 10, which is absolutely possible. He's pretty close to those numbers.
He averaged 28, 9, and 10 last year.
So it's not like that much of a progression for him. He's still going to...
In the playoffs, he averaged 35, 12, and 10.
That's wild. He is so good, and his game is not predicated on athleticism either. It's just being in the right place.
He's got that old man
touch.
game.
The old man game, and the old man game ages well because it's the old man game.
The old man
game. But you still have Tim Hardaway Jr. Brought back Trey Burke, who played great for you guys in the bubble. I think that Josh Richardson, bringing him in is going to add a lot of defense, which is really the only issue that you had last year, being that you were the greatest offensive rating team in the history of basketball last season.
Yes, we were the greatest offense in the history of basketball, and we still were the 7th seed in the West.
Yes. So you really need a defense, and I think you brought some defense in, especially and some toughness with the James Johnson trade.
Yes,
James Johnson,
we have an enforcer. Marcus Morris, swing at Luka one more time. I dare you.
Dude, James Johnson's like I think I saw he was 5-0 in UFC matches.
Oh, that guy will murder people, and I'm so here for it.
Actually a 3rd-degree black belt. James Johnson is out here to do nothing but just beat the hell out of Marcus Morris next time he starts trying to be a bully to Luka.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Just looking it up, I'm just correcting myself. He averaged 31 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists in the playoffs. So excuse me, I inflated his stats.
Got a little overzealous
just
there.
A little bit. But again, 31, 9, and 10 from a 21-year-old at the time.
Yeah, he's going into his 22-year-old season, still has room to grow, still is kind of figuring out the NBA. I mean, it's hard to say he hasn't figured out the NBA when you average 30, 10, and 10 or whatever. But I think that this does scream a potential Luka MVP season, because I don't think it'll go to Giannis because people already have the voter fatigue and whatnot. But it could be a big year for the Mavs, and I don't think you necessarily need a huge year to still feel positive about your team going forward.
Yeah, and the Mavericks also lost the most clutch games in the NBA last year.
And that's just being young, I think.
It's young. I'm trying to look up how many they actually lost at this point. But I believe...
And these games you're talking about, these are like games that are like 5 points or less within the last 2 minutes, right?
Within 5 points in the last 2 minutes, and I believe the Mavs were like 3-20 something.
See, that definitely needs to be flipped.
Yes.
Because Luka is a clutch player. He showed it in the playoffs. I mean, he's not showing it in the regular season maybe, and maybe this is not having enough help around him, so that's like where your complaints have come in, where you need like another big star. But this team is always in the game, and there just needs to be that switch that's flipped. And I think that is like being a young team growing into like being an experienced team, to where you go from being a lower seed, a 7 seed. I mean, you win most of those games, and all of a sudden you're vaulted into 4, 5, 3 seed territory.
Yeah, well, and it's tough. I mean, it starts with Luka. I mean, here's the crazy thing. Luka was amazing in the clutch his rookie year. Amazing. Like, his numbers were off the charts. His total plus minus was crazy. This year, he struggled. He was 5 for 23 from 3-pointers in the clutch this season.
Sorry,
5 for
I'm
20.
a second glass already.
5 for 23 from 3, which is 21.7%. Like, that's tough.
Wow.
But his rookie year, he was 15 of 40, which isn't great, but in the mid-30s.
Yes, and I mean, that's kind of where you want to be. You want to be a little bit more.
I mean, it's tough,
efficient than that. But yeah, it's tough. But yeah, so either way, this is a team that has probably got as bright of a future as anybody in the entire NBA. And you're looking for incremental improvements. And if I was a Mavs fan, I'd be looking at specifically those close games. How do you close out? Who are you going to? Are they just doing the Giannis theory on Luka, where they double team him every single time, and that's why he has to kick out? And he's relying on other guys. But I think that this could be a big year for the Mavs.
It also didn't help that Luka and Kristaps only played in like 20 games together in the regular season, because Luka missed a month and then Kristaps missed a month, and they were just alternating months of not playing. So the Mavs, if we can get them both healthy, I think 6 is low.
Yes.
But moving on here, I could talk about the Mavs all day. So moving on here, the 5 seed, we have a team that kind of probably has the highest raise from 2019 to 2020, which would be the Golden State Warriors.
Yes. Mainly because they didn't even try to play basketball last year.
They didn't want to.
They were literally like, hey, are you a G League guy with promise? Come play for the Golden State Warriors this year. We are trying to lose. And that's exactly what they did. Hey, they went out and they got the number 2 pick. They picked Wiseman. We thought that they were going to end up trading that pick. They decided to keep the big man, which I actually think is going to be a good fit for them regardless. Yeah,
I think the fit's there. I mean, they needed a big. They haven't had like a good big since maybe Andrew Bogut or David West.
They did have Boogie.
Yes, but Boogie got hurt and then barely played.
Yeah, so
like, I mean, you could count Boogie, but like
so Andrew Bogut was probably their most solid big man for the longest period of time.
Yes, and he was amazing. He fit their system so well. He was with them when they won the 72 games or the 74 games or whatever the hell they won. They won a lot.
Low-key one of the best screen setters there's ever been.
That guy was an Australian brick wall, that guy.
I have never seen Andrew Bogut set not a moving screen. Every single screen that he sets, he is just moving around somewhere.
I have complained about this for years, but Draymond Green, every screen he sets would be a hold in the NFL. I just don't get why it's never called, but every single screen Draymond Green sets is a hold in the NFL, and that would be 10 yards for the offense, automatic first down.
Yeah, so this team, they got some interesting pieces this year where they brought in James Wiseman. They brought in Kelly Oubre. We're going to really see what Andrew Wiggins looks like as a secondary, tertiary playmaker and scorer, because Andrew Wiggins has always had this big burden on his shoulders of like, I'm the number 1 pick. I need to go and be the guy for the Timberwolves. Now you come into a Warrior system who I would make the argument that Steve Kerr is the best coach in the NBA right now.
Him or Pop,
maybe Brad Stevens,
Carla.
Or Spoelstra. There's kind of a tier, and he is absolutely in that top tier. And I think that you now like take a lot of pressure off Wiggins, and you're like, hey, we only need 10 to 15 out of you. We need you to be a little bit more efficient and try really hard on defense. Like, we're going to be a defensive team.
Yeah, and they have this guy named Steph Curry who's literally just amazing at basketball.
I've heard he's a pretty good shooter.
Yeah, you know, he just throws it from like a million feet away and it goes in every time.
No one has ever been better at shooting off the bounce than what Steph Curry is.
No one's been a better shooter, period,
Yes.
than what Steph Curry is.
Yes, that is just straight facts. And so getting him back obviously is going to be a big deal. If they can reach number 2 seed, number 3 seed, go back to kind of where they were, even without, like, especially without Clay, he will definitely be a guy in the consideration for an MVP this year.
He's going to have to be, because their offense is going to have to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from him.
Yes.
And he's going to have to, I can see him putting up 35 a game this year. Like, I can see him putting up more. He might not be as efficient, but he's going to shoot the ball every time he touches it. And he should.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely should. You still do have some good guys on the outside with Draymond is going to be able to make plays. He'll probably be their secondary playmaker outside of Steph. And so it still allows Steph to kind of play off ball a lot and whatnot, because Wiggins and Oubre are both really good 3-and-D guys, but neither of them you really want to be playmaking a whole ton. So
you don't want the ball in their hands too much.
So it's going to be a big burden on Draymond and on Steph throughout the entire season.
And we're forgetting Wiseman, who's going to have an impact. He's going to start. He's going to be a solid player. I mean, you don't get the number 2 pick and say, all right, we'll let you develop.
Yeah. No, it's Wiseman. It's time to step up, and it's time to play well, because you're now going to play for a team that is kind of has the mindset of we should be winning championships, because that's who they were 2 seasons ago when they had a full roster, and they kind of still feel like they have that full roster minus Clay, who's a big loss, but you still have Draymond and Steph, and they are still think that they are a championship caliber team. And it's up to all these other supplementary guys to step up now.
Yeah, I think this is Steve Kerr's biggest challenge yet. Because if you think about it, he inherited a very talented roster, and he coached that roster well, and he managed it well, absolutely. But the one time he was faced with any kind of adversity as a coach, and by adversity I mean not having the most talented roster in the NBA, they sucked.
Worst team in the league.
Yes. So I'm hesitant to call Steve Kerr one of the best coaches in the league, just because he's always had the most talent in the league.
It's fair.
And so I think this year would be a big year, at least for me personally, being like, okay, is Steve Kerr really a great coach, or did he just inherit a great team and his GM just literally said, here are some of the top 5 players in the NBA, go tell them to be the best, and he'd be like, okay, hey guys, go be the best. And that's what happened. Yeah. So this is a big, like, if the Warriors do well, it is because of, 1, Steph Curry's amazing, and 2, Steve Kerr is a wizard. Mm-hmm. And he needs to prove to people right now this year is he a great coach? Because a great coach is, you could lose your second best player and still be a good team. Yeah. Or is he just a guy who inherited a great roster and kind of just rode the coattails of his players?
Yeah. And honestly, looking at the roster top to bottom, especially looking at their bench, like, I don't know if they're a team that should be above the Rockets or the Mavericks. I'm talking about, like, just total talent depth-wise, but the fact that they still do have Steph Curry and the fact that they do still have Steve Kerr, that is why I believe that they will probably end up around the 5 seed.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair bet. Moving on to the 4 seed, we have Mitch's team.
There was complete and total bias and a lot of arguing on my part to get us into the top 4 seed.
We had our pre-show meeting here with me, Mitch, and producer Jay, and we took the L because we knew it wasn't going to be worth it. But Mitch has the Blazers at 4. 4 is not out of the realm, but I don't know if this Blazers team is better than the Warriors and the Mavericks.
And that's totally fair. So here is going to be my totally biased, classic Portland Trailblazer fan rant. I will start off with, I personally have the Blazers at 2. Okay, so yes, I'm biased, but I would kind of like take a step back. I think they definitely did have one of the better off seasons of anybody in the league this year. We added a lot more depth in a lot more areas that we actually needed players, as far as versatility, athleticism, being able to knock down threes, and more importantly than anything else, perimeter defense. And so these are, like, it's all of the additions. Like, they brought in guys that have been with the team before. Like, they re-signed Rodney Hood. They brought Melo back. They just traded for Enes Kanter and got rid of Mario Hezonja. These are all guys that you know for a fact fit in your system. You traded for Robert Covington, a dude who I've been trying to yell that we should get for the last 2 to 3 years, even back when he was on Philly. And so I just think that there's a lot of pieces that now are going to fit and click with the Blazers. If you actually can stay healthy this year, I think that we should be a top 4 seed, but it is the West, and we could end up not being in the playoffs at all.
And that's the beauty of it. And it's why we love basketball right now, is because there's so much parity. Every team is kind of even with another. I agree with you that the Blazers probably had one of the better off seasons of anybody in the NBA. They killed it. They kind of went all in this year.
Yes.
They're saying, Dame, you're going to have to be great, and we don't have the most star power, but we might have the most top to bottom talented roster outside the Lakers and the Clippers.
Yes, you put a roster together and you're trying to sell Dame on the whole. Look, this year and next year are going to be the biggest potential you have for your Toronto Raptors or Dallas Mavericks championship. A full, complete roster full of guys. Like, you're not playing any bad players. We don't have any more Mario Hezonjas or Anthony Tollivers or like having to play a rookie Nasir Little. We don't have that anymore. We now have legitimate depth to the point where Zach Collins was going to be a starting four for us last year. He may not even crack the rotation when he gets back from being injured because he has an ankle surgery. He should be back around late January to early February, and he may not even be in the rotation anymore. So now all of a sudden you actually have genuine depth, and you hope that you can make some sort of championship run. And if it doesn't work this year, then I don't know, you might have to start calling it a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where they didn't build their roster to look the best on 2K. They didn't go for the best overalls. They went for the best players that would fit next to their star, Damian Lillard.
Yes.
Which Damian can score the ball. He can pass the ball. He gets to take advantage of on defense, and as does CJ McCollum. So you surround them with, great perimeter defenders.
Long, athletic guys. That's why you brought Derrick Jones Jr. in. They keep saying that he's going to be the starter. I kind of assumed it was going to be Melo no matter what, but they say Derrick Jones Jr. is going to start, and I think it's solely because of his length and versatility and to be able to switch onto Dame and CJ's guy.
And this is a very veteran-laced team. There's a lot of veterans. There's a lot of players who've been in the playoffs. There's a lot of players who have been in close games. This team is not one that's going to blink in a big moment.
Yes. I sure hope so. I like the idea that we have a guy who's a genuine closer. We now have a really solid starting lineup, a really solid bench, and I think that is going to lead to a whole lot of, at the very least, regular season wins. Whether it leads to playoff success, I don't know, but I'm very excited as a Blazer fan going into this year.
This team echoes the Toronto Raptors, the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, teams that going into the season, people are like, oh, they're good, but they're not title contenders. And then next thing you know, you're playing them in a playoff series and you're like, holy cow, this team is...
It's a good team.
Yeah, this team has no holes.
Yes.
And that's big in playoff series is like, yes, stars will get you places, but every once in a while, this team that has their one star, a circa, Dirk Nowitzki, Kawhi Leonard, those guys who are killers out there who can literally backpack you, surround them with the perfect veteran talent, people that know their roles, a good coach. That team can win a championship. It's been done before.
Yes. So I think that most people would probably assume the Blazers are going to be around the 6 or 7 seed this year. It's probably more the general thought. I really had to push for it. I think that we're going to make a big step up. Go Blazers. We're the 4 seed. Lock it in.
Mitch is...
very excited.
Oh, I was waiting for you to guarantee.
Oh,
but nope. We're past it. I was waiting for you to go guarantee. But you know what? It's fine. That's fine.
I'm not guaranteeing the Blazers unless it's a 2 seed.
Oh,
then I'll guarantee it.
Do you understand how much of a ledge we had to talk him down, ladies and gentlemen?
4 seed is fine. I can live with the 4 seed.
Oh my God. All right. 3 seed. We have a team that probably won the playoffs. They didn't win the championship, but you look at them, you're like, this team performed the best in the playoffs, and that would be the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to come back from 3-1 and not one, but 2 different series back to back, I don't think has ever been done. It is an amazing marvel to the wherewithal and the mental toughness and the sheer ability that the Nuggets actually have. I mean, I remember when they were down 3-1 to the Jazz and everyone was just like, oh, I guess the Nuggets just aren't very good. Oh, they aren't for real. Or a lot of people are like, oh, I was never sold on the Nuggets in the first place. I have been a big believer in the Nuggets for a while now. I was a little not sold on Jamal Murray, but he proved to me more than anybody in this last playoffs that he is a real deal baller. And him paired with Jokic, paired with the jump that I believe that Michael Porter Jr. is going to be making this year, is going to be more than enough to be a top 4 seed, if not a top 3, 2, and potentially 1 seed. I mean, this team really cares about winning in the regular season, as most young teams really do.
Yeah, so it has happened 13 times in the history of the NBA that a team has come back down 3-1. The Nuggets did
Just
it twice.
total
In the history.
And they're two of them.
And they're two of them. So it was 11 before this year, and the Nuggets did it twice in back-to-back series. That is a team that never says die, and that is the mindset you need to win a championship.
That's a mindset of a champion.
Absolutely.
100%.
And Jamal Murray took some big steps this year. Nikola Jokic is a bona fide top 5, 10 player in the NBA. You've surrounded this roster with some great players and some great additions. They're very similar to the Blazers, where their roster doesn't really have necessarily a lot of holes. The reason we have them at 3 and not higher is they lost Jeremy Grant, and they have a little bit of question, I'm not saying a hole, question in the backup center area, because you have Bol, you have Jeff Green, and then you have Isaiah Hartenstein, who are unproven but still capable players.
Losing Mason Plumlee is not the biggest deal in the world, but he filled that void of backup center and kind of doing what Jokic did a little bit as like a good playmaking center, where his absence is definitely going to be noticeable out there when the second unit comes in. They do have JaMychal Green. JaMychal Green.
Or JaMychal Green.
Yes.
I said Jeff Green.
Yeah, JaMychal Green.
It's JaMychal. There's
Yes.
so many Green.
So you do have a JaMychal Green. You do have an Isaiah Hartenstein. After talking to producer Jay, supposedly Bol is going to be getting a lot of run at the 3 and 4. So at the small forward and power forward is where they expect Bol to be, probably because he's such a good three-point shooter. But your biggest hole now, if you're the Denver Nuggets, is your depth at 5. You can run Paul Millsap as your small ball 5. You're probably going to roll Nikola Jokic a solid 30 to 35 minutes a night anyways. So it's not like it's not the biggest problem in the world to not have a good backup center. But that is where they are now lacking. I still really love what the Nuggets are doing, though. I think that Jamal Murray has really established himself as a guy that when he's on fire, you really just can't guard. There's a couple of those dudes out there, like when Luka or James Harden or Dame
I was about
or
to say.
Steph, like when they just catch fire, it's like, well, I hope they miss.
Yeah.
And like Donovan Mitchell did a little bit of that in the last playoffs, where Jamal Murray is now one of those guys, and Jokic is the perfect dude to put next to Murray because he just wants to pass the ball. I mean, he'd much rather facilitate than actually take the shot himself, where Murray, 10 times out of 10, would much rather take the shot than actually pass it. So they kind of fit together, actually.
Yeah, and the big thing with Jamal Murray was going into this year was like he could be great sometimes and he can be terrible sometimes, and you just kind of have to find that balance. And so he is one that kind of found his consistency a little bit, and it helped them a lot in the playoffs.
Yeah, totally agree.
So moving on to the next two teams, both play in the same city.
The worst city in the world, right?
They are, you know, 1A and 1B, and we have the Clippers and the Lakers at 1 or 2. We have the Clippers coming in at 2. We really like this Clippers team. We think they're going to come back with a vengeance. I think that they're going to be like, okay, we load managed a lot this year and just kind of like it bit us in the ass in the playoffs. So I think that they're going to try a lot harder this regular season, and I think maybe their roster lost some of their luster, but I honestly think this roster is more well-rounded.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, the thing that we kind of talked about this on an earlier podcast, but the thing that they really were lacking was a good defensive center that could actually go up against an Anthony Davis or somewhat slow down an Anthony Davis kind of guy, or a Nikola Jokic, which ended up being, you know, the bane of their entire season.
Yeah.
Now they have Ibaka. And Ibaka is a huge pickup for the Clippers. Now they can put Zubac as a backup center, and Zubac is much better as a backup center. He's got a great touch. He's a good scorer, but he's not the guy that you want to put out there and be like, hey, go shut down Anthony Davis. Like, Zubac just can't. It's like, I'm doing my best, coach. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But you still have the main core, the main crux of what that team was. You still have Paul George, who I believe is a much better player than what he showed in the playoffs last year. You still have Kawhi Leonard, who I think is a much better player than what he showed in the playoffs last year. You still have Lou Will. You brought in Lou Kennard. You still have Patrick Beverley. Like, you got a lot of good talent on this team. It's hard to believe. I could imagine that they slip from that 2 seed if for no other reason than they kind of just don't care about the regular season. But I think they are the second best team in the West.
I agree that they're the second best team, and I also think that they're going to play like it in the regular season. I think that they went into the playoffs lackadaisical and unpolished because of their lack of chemistry together, and it showed in the Mavericks series to where, like, the Clippers team should have swept that Mavericks team. They are good. They were much more talented. They were the much more well-rounded team. And the Mavericks, if they didn't lose Kristaps Porzingis, we're out there to punch them in the mouth. And it took Kristaps tearing his meniscus and Marcus Morris being just a straight thug for them to beat them.
Yeah. Going into the series, I think we were both saying like probably 5-game series.
If that.
Yeah, if that.
And the Mavs pushed it to 6. Yes, it took a crazy shot from Luka, but again, they did all this without their second best player, Kristaps, their starting center in Dwight Powell, and their sixth man in Jalen Brunson. Mm-hmm. And the Clippers came out lackadaisical, and they let the Mavs, the Mavs came out hungrier. And the Clippers were still trying to figure out how to play together. I don't think they're going to let that happen this year.
Yeah, I would assume that Ty Lue, tightens the reins a little bit on this team that pretty much ran amok with Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers kind of just let them do whatever they wanted. They probably are going to tighten it up, especially in this condensed 72-game season. I wouldn't be surprised to see still plenty of load management on the side of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, but I bet as a whole they have a lot more games played than going into last season or last postseason.
I would agree. And we've talked about the Clippers a lot. We've also talked about this last team a lot, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. We can say it before. We've said it before. We can say it again. They are the
really
cream
good.
of the crop.
They're just a really good basketball team.
It's their title to lose. They have the most talented roster. They have the most complete roster. They won the offseason. They're just good.
Yeah, they're just a good team, and it is so hard to find a hole in this team where last year it was like, oh, well, maybe they lacked a little bit in playmaking, or, oh, maybe their wings aren't very good, or maybe their bench isn't all that good. I honestly have a hard time seeing any issues that they have at this point. The only thing that I saw is that Schroeder may be complaining about coming off the bench, but I'm sure he'll shut up as soon as he realizes he's going to win a championship.
Yeah, I mean, barring a LeBron James injury.
Which never happens.
Never.
LeBron is crazily healthy for a guy that's his like weight and size and like how old he is. It's wild.
It's partly luck, and it's partly just the way he takes care of his body.
Mm-hmm.
No player in the history of, in my opinion, sports has put so much time and effort into their body management as LeBron James has. I mean,
several million a year.
Yeah, several million a year into fitness, into diet, into the way he sleeps, into the way he trains, into the way he lifts weights. Everything he does is to prolong his career and make sure he can play at the top of his game for as long as he can, and it's showing.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. The fact that he is as old as he is and that he is still playing at the MVP caliber level that he's playing at is astounding. It's amazing. It's a marvel to watch. I really do appreciate watching LeBron James more than ever. I hate him more than ever because he's playing for the Lakers, but every time I watch him, I'm like, yeah, you're watching greatness every single time. And this maybe it is his last year, maybe it's not his last year, but I think it's probably one of his last years as like the sole number one team that should win the championship, because he's had a lot of years going into the season where it was like that.
Yeah, and it's just how many guys who have played in the league and are as old as LeBron James can dunk from the free throw line in a game.
Yeah, for real.
Who can literally just posterize anybody whenever they want.
For real.
I mean, and at his age, and like, there's going to be a day where we wake up and LeBron's not going to be in the NBA, and we're going to watch the NBA, and some people are going to fight me on this, but you're going to miss him. You're going to look at it and be like, wow, it's not the same knowing that, because he's the villain. He has always been the villain of the NBA. Love him or hate him, he is the guy that everyone seems to kind of root against unless he's on your team. I mean, you have your LeBron lovers, but in the grand scheme of things, the average NBA fan is like, LeBron James on that team, I'm going to root against him.
Yep.
And so everyone, love him or hate him, you're going to wake up one day and he's not going to be there, and you're going to be like, dang, like, that was greatness I was watching, and I took it for granted.
It's weird to think that I was 9 years old when he was drafted into the NBA.
And how old are you now?
And I am now 26 years old. Just for reference, so everyone knows. But it's amazing.
It's incredible.
I've been able to watch every step of this guy's career, and I loved him for the longest part, and then I hated him for the longest part, and I especially hate him now. I kind of came back around with these with Cleveland for the second time, but the Lakers are the 1 seed. I don't think anyone's going to argue with us on that, and it's mainly because of LeBron and Anthony Davis, but it's partially because they had a great offseason.
Yeah, they added so many good players. They added Dennis Schroeder, who we've talked about. We've added Montrezl Harrell, who we talked about. They added Wesley Matthews, who we've talked so many times about what these Lakers have brought in, and I mean, it's championship or bust, and I would be shocked if they don't push in the playoffs. It would be quite the upset if they were to lose.
Absolutely. At any point when they lose in this season, whether it's regular season or playoffs, people are going to be talking about it because it is expected of this team to win and win a championship.
Absolutely.
You're going to the season, that is it.
Yeah, man. The Lakers are just, they're the Lakers, man.
They should win the championship.
They really should. And we forgot to take a break and talk about the whiskey. So we got so caught up in just the death trap that is the Western Conference. So let's go back. Let's recap this whiskey here. Jefferson's.
Very small batch blend of straight bourbon whiskeys made in Louisville, Kentucky. I like it. I like it a lot, actually. I mean, I was kind of drinking it easy at one point where I was like, oh, time to pour another glass.
I did notice that you've had several.
I think that I like this a lot, actually. I will say, it's like what I said earlier, without any ice in it, it was a little spicy. It was a little harsh. And I was like, oh, I don't know. But then after putting a couple ice in it and letting it dilute a little bit, I really got a lot of those sugary flavors that kind of like make it pop.
Mitch likes ice in his whiskey.
Mitchell likes 2 ices in his whiskey.
I
I think it brings out the best flavor. I think it brings out the best flavor. 1 to 2 ices in your whiskey. My dad likes to put just a little bit of water in his. He doesn't even put ice in it. He just like pours a little water in it.
Oh.
Shout out Trent if you're listening to this one.
And you had another shout out you wanted to give for this one.
Oh, shout out to Grandma Linda. Grandma Linda, thank you for being one of our followers. I hope you're listening to this far into the podcast. Love you, Grandma.
And a final shout out, Jake, if you're listening, this is not a water polo podcast, man. Just let it go. Stop commenting on our stuff, asking if this is a water polo podcast, because it's a basketball podcast, and I don't know where you're getting this.
Like, I haven't heard of any of these water polo players.
I don't get it. But yes, the Jefferson's whiskey, it's good. Thomas Jefferson, great dude. We will start our next podcast from the boat. We are now applying to be boat drivers in the 7 seas. We're gonna be whiskey pirates.
Yes, we are. We're gonna start a new pod as whiskey pirates.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our podcast. That is our top 10 in the West, brought to you by Jefferson's Whiskey. Really happy to do another pod, man.
Yes, happy to get another one down.
Cheers
to
brother.
Jefferson.